Welcome to 40 Years and 40 Beers. As always, it's your host, Bob Bain and Joe Massi. We're really excited to welcome back Delco's finest, Leah Cevoli. How are you, Leah?
I'm
Leah,
good.
welcome.
How's everybody?
We're doing awesome. Thank you so much for coming back on. You were one of our most beloved guests, one of our better friends of the show. We really enjoy having you on. So we're thankful you had the time to come back.
Well, I feel like we're family now, right?
Yeah.
From Southwest Philly, Our Lady of Loretta, to Delco the movie. I mean, we're family now.
Yeah. We're excited to get you back for part 2. So thank you.
Thanks for having me.
So what we left off last time is, we learned about how you went through life becoming an actress, how you moved out to LA. You kind of adapted the one more day at a time attitude, right? And we left off where you kind of left Deadwood and then got this unbelievable opportunity with Robot Chicken. Massi and I were a little upset that we didn't get to cover a lot of that last time because I'm a big Robot Chicken fan. I don't know how anybody isn't. So please, let's delve into how you got into Robot Chicken, what you did there, and what your experiences were like.
Oh, you guys are going to love it. You're going to love this story. It's another one of those kind of magical moments. Speaking up, so I was still working on Deadwood. It was season 3 of HBO's Deadwood, and still non-union, like we were chatting about, still non-union, making that minimum wage money as background on HBO's Deadwood, even though working 15, 18 hours a day. There was this little website back then called Friendster. I'm dating myself. It might be before your guys' time.
That's before Facebook.
Yes, Friendster was a precursor to MySpace. It was before MySpace.
Wow, okay.
Which I don't know, did you guys have a MySpace?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
we were on MySpace.
Okay,
Yeah,
all right.
yeah.
So Friendster was the thing right before MySpace. And it was sort of, I would say it was kind of like a MySpace or I guess Facebook/LinkedIn kind of thing. A guy by the name of Matt Senrich had reached out to me on Friendster. I did not know that name. I didn't know anything about him. But if you're in the comic industry at the time, you would have known his name as he was, I believe, one of the editors of Wizard magazine in New York, based out of New York. And Matt reached out to me on Friendster, not for work purposes, but he was a New Yorker about to move to the West Coast and was kind of looking for advice as another East Coaster who had moved to the West Coast, and kind of reached out in that fashion. Chit-chatted with him for a second or two on Friendster, and that was that. Flash forward, I don't know, 6 months, 9 months later, and Matt's in town now and invites me to come out and have coffee with him. And I remember it was one of those days where I was on some set somewhere till like 8:30 at night, and we were meeting at a Starbucks. And back then, I mean, maybe again now, but back then all the Starbucks closed around like 9-ish or something. So I remember it was a really quick meeting, like kind of at the end of the night. Who meets for coffee at the end of the night? But we did. Met for coffee at the end of the night, and just kind of was telling Matt my experience. At this point, it was 2004, and I had been in LA for about 5 years at this point. And was just kind of telling him my experience, what I was doing, and the challenges of really trying to pursue the acting career and not having a day job and having to take these minimum wage acting background gigs to establish myself. And, it was a normal conversation. He told me a little bit about the Wizard magazine and the comic world, something I really didn't know a whole heck of a lot about at that point. And at the end of our conversation, we're saying our goodbyes, and he says, well, you know what? Me and my partner, Seth Green, we just launched a new show, and we're going to start recording soon. It's a cartoon. It's on Cartoon Network. It's been picked up by Cartoon Network. It's called Robot Chicken, and maybe we'll get you in there someday. Great. Now, as with anything in life, but particularly in Hollywood, you take everything with a grain of salt. I mean, this was a fellow I just met,
Yeah.
And I had been in LA for 5 years at this point, and, everybody has something for you. We kept in touch, and it's a moment that stays with me because, and you guys will really appreciate this coming from Our Lady of Loretto. It was December of 2004, and I typically did not take long-term job assignments back then because I wanted to be open for Deadwood. And this time around, though, I did. I took a long-term substitute teaching job for a couple weeks in December. There was a teacher out on a maternity leave, and I have my degree in elementary education. So I took this long-term subbing position for a couple weeks, and the first day, Deadwood called, and they wanted to know. Of course they did, right? And they wanted to know if I was available, and I had to say no. And that day I get a call from one of the girls that, oh my goodness, one of the other girls got upgraded, got speaking lines that day. Okay. The next day, Deadwood calls. I have to say no. I get a call from one of the girls that day. Oh my gosh, Maxim magazine came on set today and we all got paid an extra couple $100 to pose in this ad for Deadwood that's going to run in Maxim magazine. And I remember on my lunch break that day, and I was writing in LiveJournal. For those of you that remember LiveJournal, it does still exist out there. It was before Blogger and blog posts and before all of the blog pages that are out there right now. Yep, Medium, exactly. And so LiveJournal, I'm on my lunch break, and I remember writing a blog post, but in it, I'm like, dear God, why? Why did I say yes to the substitute teaching job this week? Why am I missing out on Deadwood? Please God, And I click post, publish, and instantly, ding, an email comes in, and it's Matt. And he wants to know if I'm available the very next day because they are now recording season 1 of Robot Chicken. And Melissa Joan Hart was scheduled to come in and record Sabrina the Teenage Bitch. And at the last minute, Disney said, she's under a contract, can't parody it, whatever the reasons were. They weren't allowed to use Melissa Joan Hart.
Wow.
And could I come in the next day and do this? Now, fortunately, the school that I was substitute teaching at was a charter school, and they had off on Fridays.
Okay.
And this was going to be a Friday.
Now, did you demand what they were going to pay Melissa?
No. No, but in fact, fun fact, especially back in those days, I believe that all of Seth and Matt's friends were probably working for the same amount of money that I was because it was such a low shoestring budget, especially in the first season or two. Like those guys funded everything themselves.
You gotta prove yourself,
Yeah, and their animation studio did not exist yet. Stupid Buddy Studios did not exist as an entity yet. They were renting space somewhere. They didn't have the whole kind of, what's the word I'm looking for, compound that they have now in Burbank. Okay. So they were renting like a studio in Santa Monica. Now, I had never done voiceover in my entire life, let alone cartoon voiceover animation. Never really had even thought of that as a career. But I'd always been a little odd, and I've always been kind of somebody that makes weird noises and automatically starts talking in other people's accents when they're around, not on purpose. It just kind of comes out of me. So I was like, I can do this. So of course I said yes. And this was going to be my Taft-Hartley into the union because Robot Chicken was a union job. And it was kind of one of those perfect storms because the whole point of the Taft-Hartley supposed to be is that you had some sort of special ability and the person, and they couldn't get anybody but you. Now, in this case, the person that was booked was no longer available. So, it kind of made sense that, they were able to use the Taft-Hartley and bring me in. Now, after I agree to this, Deadwood calls, and they also want me the next day. And what ended up happening was I remember talking to the background casting folks at Deadwood and said, hey, I've booked this voiceover job and it's going to be my Taft-Hartley into the union. It's, going to be a $700 day compared to my $80 day on Deadwood. I don't know what to do. Well, they talk to the ADs on set, the first assistant director, and they say, no, Leah has to be here tomorrow because it's a matching scene, something they'd already shot in the Gem Saloon, and I'm already established, and they can't do it without me. So I'm like, what? So Deadwood asks, so I was supposed to go into Robot Chicken at, I want to say it was maybe 10:30, 11 a.m. Voiceover people don't typically get up early. Voiceover people don't typically, maybe not.
Yeah.
They're not
There's
normally
no
going to have.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
You have the flexibility.
Right. Not normally going to have an early morning session necessarily, especially a show like this where they're all friends. They're just getting started. And Deadwood says, can you call the Robot Chicken production team back and find out if they can get you in earlier? So I have to call Matt and be like, Matt, there's this conflict and Deadwood wants me. So the Robot Chicken guys agree to come in like an hour early. And I call Deadwood back and I'm like, okay, Robot Chicken says, they can see me at 9:30 in the morning. Deadwood goes, great. As soon as you're done, get here. And geographically speaking, Robot Chicken is in Santa Monica, California at this time by the ocean. I'll say over here. So let's say this is the west coast of California. And Deadwood is up here in Santa Clarita, up in the mountains.
Okay. Yeah, you're not going around the corner.
Yeah. Not walking distance.
Right. But I did it and it happened. It was amazing. And I get there to the Robot Chicken Studios and I meet Seth for the first time. And Matt introduces me to Seth because Seth is there as the director. Seth directed me every single episode I've ever worked on Robot Chicken. Seth was the director. I believe there are some other guest directors here and there, but back then particularly, Seth Green was there at every session, directing every session. I even jumped in the booth with me a few times to voice other characters. There's one character I did as a little girl. She's playing like a euthanasia board game, and Seth is the little boy playing the board game. So we're in there bouncing around things with each other. But when I get there, I've never met him, and he's Seth Green. Everybody knows who Austin Powers. Everybody knows who Seth Green, especially if you're from Philly, because he's from this area. Yeah, he's from North Philly. His mom was a school teacher in the area. So Matt introduces me to Seth, and right away, he's just big hug. He's like, "You're from Philly, I'm from Philly," big hug. Right away, it's just like, oh, wow, these people are super cool. And I look, and it's Mila Kunis in the booth. And she's doing, her bit. And I was so grateful and lucky to be there early. I'm never early, but I was there early that day and got to watch what Mila did.
Yeah.
Because I would have had no idea how a voiceover session goes, particularly an animation session.
She already had experience from Family Guy, right? So,
oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Right? I'm sure she's probably had done a ton of other things prior to that even, but obviously Family Guy.
And the two of them together, they're used to working together as well. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So I'm like, what? Right. But I get to watch and I get to learn because there's a common thing in voiceover where a director might ask you to give 3 takes without necessarily regrouping or stopping, So let's say the line is, there's a skeleton on my pot holder. They might say, okay, just give me 3 takes of that. There's a skeleton on my pot holder. There's a skeleton on my pot holder. There's a skeleton on my pot holder. But I would not have known that was common. And I think I would have thought that I was messing up if Seth kept going, yeah, give me another take of that. Give me 3. Just give me 3 takes of that. But I got to witness that that's actually protocol. Now, in the meantime, this woman comes over to hand me, one of the producers there comes over to hand me the paperwork for me to sign. And this is, my Taft-Hartley, my SAG paperwork. I'll just sit down on the couch here, while Mila's finishing up. And I sit down and Macaulay Culkin is sitting next to me.
Wow.
That's crazy.
Because he's dating Mila at the time, right? So at this point, I am just like I've left my body.
Yeah.
And I think, okay, I saw coffee in the lobby. So I kind of raised my hand. I mean, maybe I didn't raise my hand, but I'm like, I'm going to go get some coffee. Does anybody want anything? And everybody's like, no, we're good. I go out to the coffee machine and I'm like, what the hell is going on?
Yeah.
I'm like, you're about to get your SAG card. This is your Taft-Hartley that you've been praying for 4 years now.
Sure.
You're about to get your SAG card. You're being directed by Seth Green. Mila Kunis is in the booth before you, and you're sitting next to Macaulay freaking Culkin.
Guy from Home Alone's helping you review the paperwork.
Right?
I would have passed out. That's got to be crazy.
Yeah.
That's nuts. Yeah.
I don't even know if I drank that coffee. I don't remember really what happened from there.
Yeah, it was an excuse to collect yourself. Yeah.
Absolutely. Step out of the situation for a second, put my feet back on the ground, pinch myself and be like, okay. And so then I pulled it together and I was like, all right, well, you got this. They think you can do it. You can do it. You're good. You're a professional. I've been in classes for years. I've been around David Milch and on set for years. I got this. Who cares? No big deal. Hey, I'm doing Sabrina the Teenage Bitch because Melissa couldn't make it, right? So the other thing with voiceover, particularly animation, is you'll typically do 3 characters. A union contract usually consists of 3 characters. So they threw a couple other smaller, one-liner characters at me when I was there, and they always did that. Every time I was in the booth, they'd be like, hey, can you also read this one, that one? But I must have done a decent job because they brought me back for 8 more episodes. It was either 8 or 9 episodes in total. over their first 4 seasons. I kept coming in. Now, it's never the same character, because if you're a fan of Robot Chicken, there's not a whole lot of repeat characters.
No.
Mm-hmm.
But in the first 4 seasons, it was amazing kind of to watch their growth and see that more and more celebrities became part of the cast, because as it became more popular, Seth and Matt and those guys were able to bring in more of their famous friends, right? Maybe in season 1, they weren't interested in coming and working for scale, which is what we call like the basic union pay for the job is scale pay. And celebrities typically, their agent's going to get them scale plus whatever. But as far as I know, every single person, especially in those first 4 or 5 seasons, maybe even still now, was working for scale just because of the small budget of the entire production. I would look on the IMDb occasionally and see that, wow, I've been on this show more times than Christian Slater, for instance, our good friend Christian Slater. Funny story. I told you about the Christian Slater story on My Name is Earl last time. Mm-hmm. But the first time I met Christian Slater, that was not the first time I met Christian Slater. The first time I met Christian Slater was at Robot Chicken, because I was there one day recording. And before I left, Matt was like, hey, Christian Slater's coming in next if you want to just like hang out for a minute.
Yeah, why not?
I'm like, okay.
Of course I do. Yeah. I'll speak slowly.
All right. So I hung out, got introduced to Christian Slater briefly, and watched him for a little bit before I left. However, that day on set at My Name is Earl, during one of the breaks, I got to say to him, we met recently at Robot Chicken, and he was like, oh, I thought you looked familiar, right? So like he had kind of, Yeah. Then I ran into him one more time right after that at a red carpet. And a friend was like, you should say hi. And I'm like, no, he's definitely going to think I'm stalking him. This is just so strange. And then, long story short, we're walking one way, him and his manager are coming up the other way, and he recognized me and stopped me. And he was like, hey, yeah, Leah, Robot Chicken, right? And introduced me to his manager. Cool. And my friend's elbowing me like, see? And I'm like, well, I didn't want to be like weird, Like this is like 3 times in like the span of like 3 months or something. And it was just one of those weird things. But Robot Chicken it opened my eyes and my world up to a completely different world that I had never known about. So that was when I started to have fans, like people knew some of these characters. To this day, I get friends that are watching like Robot Chicken reruns, and they send me a screenshot of like one of my characters. There was a concert called Rocklahoma in Pryor, Oklahoma in 2007. And it was the first time. They still do it. It's been going on every year, I believe. But I think this was the first one or the second one. And I was there with a girlfriend of mine who at the time was on that reality show Rock of Love with my old boss from Poison, Bret Michaels. And I was there with her, and so she's getting recognized all over the place. But these young teenage boys, they were stagehands, recognized me. And all of a sudden they were like, you're on Robot Chicken, aren't you? And it was like the young boys, it was the young teenagers that really kind of gravitate to that show. Like whenever anybody were to ask me about it, I kind of say it's for boys from age 8 to 80.
Yeah.
Was kind of what I said. Not that girls don't like potty mouth humor and all of that, but there's a lot of farting and pooping and blood and all that
it's
stuff.
It's gotta be 80-20 boys, yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Right, kind of how I viewed it. There was another instance I remember. I was hosting an event. I used to do a lot of volunteer work at the SAG Foundation out in Los Angeles. And as such, some opportunities would come my way. And one of these opportunities was I was asked to MC. It was a safety prevention fair that was being hosted by like the Los Angeles Fire Department. And so me and my co-host was a fireman. We were hosting this safety fair, this MC, and it was out on like a lawn. It was outside. It was a big to-do. And during one of the breaks, he brings over his kids to meet me. And they're, I don't know, maybe 10, 12-ish, maybe even a little younger, 2 boys. And he brings them over to introduce me. He's like, hey, my sons are a big fan of the show. And I'm thinking, really? Because, it's on Adult Swim, and it's on at like 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. This is not a show for 8, 10-year-olds to be watching. It's a cartoon, but it's adult humor. And now, granted, if you're at a certain age, the adult humor is kind of flying over your head probably, and you're just laughing because people are stabbing each other and shooting each other and, throwing up on each other, whatever they're doing. And so the 2 boys, the one kid says, yeah, I really like that one episode where blah, 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 blah. And his dad went, what? And I looked at his dad and I said, yeah, I don't know why your boys are watching. And like, he had no idea. You know, this fireman is like, yeah. And I'm like, yeah, it's on Adult Swim. It's not for kids.
Not to tell you how to be a parent, but
Right. And that kind of thing happened, you know, multiple times over the years. But it was such a fun time. And Seth, Matt, Chris McKay, who was the animation director back then, who he's gone on to do Lego Batman and all kinds of amazing things. Oh my gosh, Doug Goldstein and Tom Root, and many of them are from this area. Many of them were from the Philadelphia area, which I guess is how they all kind of knew each other.
Sure.
They really took me under their wing back then and really kind of introduced me to the world of Comic-Cons. My first Comic-Con ever was the big one, San Diego Comic-Con. And, you know, it's funny, right? Because it's like some of these experiences, I don't want to say spoiled me, but it kind of like showed me some of the best, right? From Deadwood and how all of us were treated on that show and working with David and all of them to Seth and Matt and this just really fun group of creative people to these Comic-Con worlds where I didn't know anything about. And the very first one I attended was just to support them. It was, I guess it would have been Comic-Con 2005 because that's when season 1 aired. So I drove down not realizing what a humongous thing it was. Have either one of you guys ever been to San Diego Comic-Con?
No, never.
What about like New York Comic-Con or anything?
Never been to one. No, never been to a Comic-Con.
Okay, well, San Diego Comic-Con is 3 days of like thousand nerds and geeks and cosplays and just so much fun. But it's also a massive invasion of San Diego.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know, thousands upon thousands of people. Yeah, descend on the Gaslight Quarter in San Diego. It's kind of like this little old-fashioned area, and that's where the convention center is. So I drove down there. I remember like the Robot Chicken guys were doing a panel. Let's say it was like 2:00 or something in the afternoon. Not knowing what this was like, I jump in my car at like 11:30.
You would think that's a decent amount of time.
Yeah.
Usually takes 2 hours to get from LA to San Diego. I think I got there just before 5:00. I'd missed the panel. The convention floor was closing, but I was able to connect with the Robot Chicken guys who now were on their way to tons of business meetings and business dinners, but pawned me off on some kind friends of theirs. And my plan was literally just to come down for the panel and drive back home. But once I got there, and plus the fact that I missed the panel, I was in and ended up just kind of staying for the weekend and flying by the seat of my pants with like no real plans. But from there forward, a lot of people, if you're watching out there and you're thinking like, well, how do I get into a Comic-Con? I've done some voiceover, I've done this or I've done that. I think what a lot of people don't know is there's something called a professional badge, and you do have to apply for it like a year ahead of time, but you apply for the professional badge, you show them your credits, your resume, your work, and if you're approved, there's your free pass. You don't have to worry about, it's very hard to get a ticket to Comic-Con these days, and people wait online for hours. They sign up for lotteries just in order to get a hotel near the convention center. It's a big thing. And more people are coming. So it's harder and harder and harder to get a ticket to Comic-Con. But if you have a professional badge, you just have to make sure you renew it every year and you're golden. So from that point on, so I learned a lot from that first Comic-Con and just being around veterans of that world and how to do things. So from that forward on, I've been to at least 10 San Diego Comic-Con since then. And the very next year, started speaking on panels. I was asked to be on a panel called The Most Dangerous Women of Comic-Con that was being hosted by Bonnie Burton, who she's an author, a geek writer, and at the time she was working for George Lucas at Lucasfilms. And she was very connected in the Robot Chicken world as well. So I met so many people from that group and was invited, in these panels of talking about just being women creators in this world and women actors in this world. And at the time I had a couple web series going and other indie projects that I was working on or a part of. And soon after that, I started producing my own panels. And that's where I created the All Shapes and Sizes Welcome panel. This is a group of women that I put together. A couple recurring names, like one of my best friends, Helena Santos Levy. She's been on almost every panel that we've done, as well as Miracle Laurie, who was in Joss Whedon's Dollhouse, and Adrienne Curry from America's Next Top Model. She was one of, you probably are familiar with Adrienne.
Peter Brady.
Yes, she ended up.
Knight, right? Isn't that his name? Something Knight.
Yes, Christopher Knight, yes. But I brought these women together, and not everyone on the panel, it wasn't just about being plus size, but it was about being body positive. It was about body image. It's about eating disorders. It's about the modeling industry. It's about the advertising industry. And so I just gathered some of the strongest, most powerful women I knew in that industry to start speaking on these panels. And we had a lot of success. And I'm really grateful that, like people like Adrienne and Miracle, who I was not friends with at the time, took a chance on, I don't know who this girl is, but she's on Robot Chicken. She knows these guys. She must be cool. She's doing this thing that aligns with what I do in my world. And so the panels really became about self-empowerment and body positivity and self-love.
It never occurred to me that you could have a panel that wasn't about a show or a movie.
Yes.
And I understand that everyone involved in the panel was in the industry, but the purpose of the panel had nothing to do with a movie or a show necessarily.
Absolutely. And when I submitted it, because you have to, it's like the secret society to find out how to even submit a panel to Comic-Con. Like it's not published anywhere on their website.
Because the panel you're describing, like you would never imagine this would be a Comic-Con, right? Like Adrienne Curry, I imagine her going to like, a VH1 maybe convention sort of panel.
Yes and no, though. What you probably don't know about Adrienne is she's a huge geek. So Comic-Con was her world, that she would be there as Miracle Laurie as well, because she was on a sci-fi show. But you're absolutely right that there was nothing else like it at the time. And I don't really recall how I found how to submit, but I stacked my submission with those names, right? You had to put down on your submission who you would ask to be your panelist.
Committed,
Right. And I knew that like Adrienne and Miracle were kind of Comic-Con darlings, as in like a lot, like they have like rabid fan bases and people that like to see them at the cons, get their autograph and pictures and stuff with them. So I stacked my submission a little bit, thinking like, all right, well, I've got some like heavy hitters on there. And then I had me and my friend Helena and a few other people who were lesser known. But you're absolutely right that it was a different topic, and Comic-Con International embraced us wholeheartedly, to the point that they were emailing me, like the next year asking, are you going to be submitting your panel again?
Yeah.
Because they didn't have anything like it at the time.
That's a great accomplishment.
Yeah, it was really super cool. And from there, I don't know if that was, sure. I think that inspired other women in my circles, outside of my circles, and more geek girl panels really started popping up, like Geek Girls Create and things like that. I was on a Geek Girl Create panel at WonderCon, which is like the baby sister to San Diego Comic-Con, and that's in Anaheim, California. And so many people really, and we had men coming out to the panel too. And I've recently did that panel, a smaller version, at the Media Comic-Con here in Pennsylvania, not last year, but the year before. And I did have a fellow. It was the first time I ever had a gentleman on the panel, actor named James Stokes. He is the most recent Jason in the Friday the 13th movies.
That's great.
He's Jason in the last like couple movies. And he's very body conscious. He works out a lot. He's very athletic. And I thought it would be kind of cool to and I knew he was going to be at the Media Comic-Con, and invited him to be on the panel. It was with myself and Nicole Eisenik, who was the most recent Philadelphia SAG-AFTRA president. So I brought her in as kind of a voice from the Philadelphia area and being in an executive position like she is, and brought him in as someone who has been cast because of his body type, right? Like, let's be real, Jason body type is one of the number one things they're going to look at to be cast as somebody iconic like that, or any kind of a horror film villain is usually going to be some kind of big dude. So that panel has just progressed. It's been, 10, 15 years of doing that panel in various shapes and sizes all across the country. But one of my most favorite memories that sticks with me was at San Diego Comic-Con, and we had just finished our panel, and we would open it up to audience Q&A. And this little girl stood up, and she was maybe 9, 10 years old, and she walked up to the microphone to ask a question. And she said to us, "What do you do if you're walking down the street and someone says something mean to you?" And she was a little chubby, and our whole panel just like gasped. "Well, you're going to stand up for yourself. Who cares what they think?" Punch
them in the face.
Right. I'm sure that's probably what Adrian said, So she probably jumped up and probably said something like that. And it just really, every time I do that panel, I feel like I've made a difference. I feel like I've touched somebody's life in some way, shape, or form. And they're leaving that panel with a little bit more confidence in themselves, and maybe a little bit more grit, right? Maybe a little bit more Philly grit comes out, and learning how to just kind of stand up for themselves better. It's interesting because I'm 51, and I still encounter bullies. I still deal with bullies.
Oh, absolutely.
I still see people saying negative things about me or trying to body shame me. And it's like that shit just like rolls off my back. Like, get a grip. We're all adults here. And if you haven't learned how to be a nice person by now, you're always going to be a bully, and no one really likes bullies. Eventually all bullies fail.